Good evening, everyone. We're on part 2 of the frame stretch of this Peterbilt project. A few things I want to go over before I get started on everything. I mentioned last night on part 1, I guess you would say, if you lost a hood pin, and I said I would show this, if you drill here, you should be able to drill your drill bit. You want to get a drill bit the same size as this, and you'll drill all the way through till your drill bit comes out here. That way you can put your styrene rod or brass rod in. That was one thing I didn't mention that I should have. As you can see, we have it back on all the tires. The suspension is not underneath the rear. But what we're going to do is we're going to cut the truck in half here, and we will figure out our wheelbase. I've got a couple of trucks I'm going to show as far as how I set wheelbase, and then we'll fit the brass in and get it ready for paint or body work if it needs it. Now, I'm not going to strip this frame. I think I'm just going to scuff it down a little bit, shoot my primer on top of it, then reshoot it white. I don't think there's no need in doing a full-on strip down of the frame. So we're going to go over to the bandsaw and cut the truck in half. Okay, we're over here at the bandsaw. I had a Ryobi bandsaw for a long time, and it finally, the motor went out. This one is a Porta-Cable. I picked it up at Lowe's. It does a pretty good job, so I have no complaints. They're all basically the same thing, and they work all about the same. Just make sure when you're purchasing a bandsaw that you look for a bandsaw that blades are available for. So we're going to zoom in, and we are going to cut this truck in half. Alright, I said last night in the previous video I was going to find the center of this truck. This second hoe, there's a little tab here. That is basically about where the center is on the truck, so that's where we're going to cut it. There you have it. You got a truck cut in half, 2 pieces, and I will show you why I put the running gear back, or the wheels and tires back in, as soon as we get back to the bench. Alright, we're back at the bench here. A couple things I want to talk about just for a quick second. This truck originally was at this length. Now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, DCP come out with a 320-inch wheelbase truck. Now, if you left it like it is, you can see that that truck was quite a bit shorter. If you went with a 320-inch wheelbase truck, you would have the same design as the white and gray truck. I'm not going to stretch this truck quite as long, so I'm going to probably set it about 300 inch or somewhere around that length, which, granted, you're not putting a whole lot of wheelbase into the truck. I use a lot of machinist tools, so you know, if you're a beginner and you don't have this, you can use a tape measure. They make 1/64 rulers, and I've just used these because this is what I know. from my previous history of occupation. Now if you look, we're putting about a 1/2 inch expansion onto this frame. So I went ahead and cut a couple pieces of brass. Now granted, I have a milling machine and a lathe inside my shop, which makes things easier for me designing and building certain pieces in this hobby. And what I do is I take a 7/32 piece of brass. The number, this is K&S metal. It's a 7/32 by 14 thousandths sidewall. You have to, with my old bandsaw, I could separate these and get 2 pieces out of one. But with this new bandsaw, the blade seems like it's a little wider. So therefore, I can only get 1 piece. Now, what I do is I cut my lengths. There again, there's the number for the brass square tubing if anybody's interested in that. I chuck my brass up in my mill, and I'll show you a clip of that. And I just machined the face off of it to get a piece of C-channel. Bad thing is, because this is so thin, you can see where it's kind of have bent it a little bit, but it's no big deal. When that happens, you just take a pair of small pliers, and I use these for a lot of different things. They're kind of a flat. They have no teeth, so it does not mark it. So if you did bend it, it's no big deal. You just take it and work it a little bit and get it back square. But I went ahead and cut my pieces for this, and like I said, I've got to sand the frame and get it to length. So I'm going to do that. I'll come back and show you what I've done. Alright, we got the frame cleaned up. One thing that a hobbyist must have in this hobby, if I was going to say what would be my first semi-expensive tool, let me get a couple things here. You know, you don't have to have, you know, all the expensive things. Wow, I should have had this planned a little better. It was just something I thought of after I started shooting. Anyways, that's part of doing these videos. You know, as far as stuff to use, this is a miter box and the blade. You can pick these up at Hobby Lobby. I would say this would probably be the cheapest solution to cutting things. You can cut frames, brass, styrene, wood, anything you want. They come as a kit, I believe. I think you have to buy the handle separate. So that's one thing you could purchase. I'm not a big fan of them now since I've grown in the hobby. Second thing, this was back when Walmart was carrying Dremel. This is a little bitty one. It's not very tall. I mean, it's a very small piece, but you know, it will do the job. They come with one battery. I bought 2 of them because I got them when they was discontinuing them. But you should be able to pick up a small Dremel, probably around 30-40 bucks. Me, I'd rather save my money and buy this than I had the miter box, but the miter box does come in handy. Then you can upgrade to a bigger Dremel. Still only has one battery, but it's variable speed, and it's just a better Dremel altogether. So then, after you go that route, and I was doing it for a long time, but then I went back to a plug-in corded Dremel because I got tired of charging all the time. Variable speed, you can still buy these. Dremels are usually going to cost you about anywhere between 20 bucks to 120 bucks. They're just depends on what you're wanting. So back to the truck. I went in here with a Dremel with a 60 grit sanding disc on my Dremel, and as I said last night, I like to have bare metal for the brass to adhere to. So I just scuffed here, across the top, across the bottom. And I noted it before we cut it, there was a little tab there, and you have to grind it off. But same thing around the bottom, side, and top. Another thing helps out a lot is if you sand your brass, the edges on it, however you cut it. You can cut this with a Dremel with a cutoff wheel. It's a little more time consuming, but we're going to put it together, and you want this to be fairly tight when you're doing it. You don't want it real loose. I pre-fitted this before I come back with the video. So this is why I put the wheels and tires back on, just so I could see what we was looking at. So as you can tell, this one is a little bit shorter. Zoom in and you can see that, you know, I don't know, 20 feet and 64th, right off the top of my head, I don't know what that is, but you can tell that front wheel versus the rear wheel is pretty much in the center of the 320-inch wheelbase. So one thing to look at, now note I did take the screws back out of my bunk and my cab. As I said last night, I usually try to put them in there so they do not get lost. But I'm just going to fit this back on here just so you'd have an idea of what we're looking at. So that is front of the trucks, the back of the truck. It's a little bit shorter. It's not stretched out way out there, so I would say it's 305 inch wheelbase, which is kind of where I was wanting. I didn't want it 320. To me, it was just a little long. Not sure what trailer will pull this truck behind this truck, but that's how that goes. I've got a few things I want to prep before I do part 3. So if I was to glue this together tonight, which I'm not going to do, what I generally do when I do this, like I said, and I'll come in here with a wire brush on my Dremel, which is on the end of this one, or you can take some sandpaper and scuff the inside of the brass and on the front and back, because when it's scuffed down, things typically adhere better to each other. So what I will do is scuff the inside of the brass. Of course, the frame rails have already been scuffed, and I'll put a dab of glue. Now, this pinhole and this pinhole was for the fuel tanks. You're going to lose them when you put your brass on, but you still have the front hose. So when you go back to assemble your tanks, you'll just have to remove the pin for the rear of the fuel tanks, and when you put your fuel tank on, now granted, some of you may not know this, so I'm going to show you. On these fuel tanks, there is a fill hole here and a fill hole there. That is a right and a left. This goes on the driver's side, this goes on the passenger side. When you go to assemble these back on, make sure you put them on the right side, because if you don't, you know, I guess it's okay, but you know, typically the fuel nozzle goes in the rear of the tank behind the bump. All the DCP trucks that have come out, I'm going to say they all have it in the rear of the tank. But back to this, you will lose the pin. This is the driver's side. All you would do is take a knife and you will cut that tab off, then put your little glue. It'll be a flat spot there, so you can put your little glue on the end of this, put a little glue on that, stick it back in. Now you may have to take a file or something and clean this tip off just a little bit, just so it slides in a little easier. But once you get that back to this, put your little glue here and push it in, and then I'll take the same, put a little glue on this side, push it in, and then typically what I do is put glue here and glue here, slide it together, push it together, and you're done. Now sometimes what I will do is I will put glue inside of the frame rail here and let it run, and that just bonds this part of the brass to the frame on each side. The glue that I use is this. I got it at my local hobby store. You can get it anywhere. It's BSI, I believe is what it is. There's several people that carry it. That is the glue that I use, and this is the activator I use. There's plenty of people out there. You can order it off of eBay, Amazon. There's plenty of places you can get it, but I highly recommend it. It's a little more expensive than super glue or Gorilla Glue or whatever, but when you put the glue on to a product and you spray the accelerator on it, it's done. Make sure you have your part where you want it. I found this and it has really worked great. It's just a little squirt bottle I found at the hobby shop, and I keep Instacure in it, the accelerator. And if I can zoom in, tilt, so I'm not even pressing on it. See, there's a little spot there. You just put it on, and that's all it takes is one little drop, and your part is set. You're ready to move on to something else, and it just makes life so much easier. highly recommend them two products. But once you get that set, you will pull the wheels and tires back off. You'll pull the front suspension off and shoot it to color your choice. So I will go over how I paint. It's very expensive to get started, but I'll do a video on that and tell why I do the way I do. To me, it's a no-brainer. Yes, it's expensive to get into, but I've learned in this hobby I'd rather go ahead and spend the money, or let me back up, I'd rather save my money to get what I really want instead of buying something that will not do what I want it to do, and I won't be happy with the results. I'm very picky with my projects and how they turn out. For instance, this truck I painted a while back. Now, from first glance, you know, everybody's be like, man, that's a pretty paint job. Very nice. This was a silver. It's a GMC silver with tangerine orange candy. I striped it all off, painted it, thought it was going to turn out great. Did a lot of time and body work on this little truck, added the drop panels. But if you can see, you can still see, and this is underneath the clear, and underneath the paint there was an impurity of the body filler I used, and you can see the waviness. On this Kenworth, it had a groove that ran all the way across here, and I filled it, and once it got painted, primed, I thought it was good, wet sanded it, shot it silver, and this did not show up until after it was cleared. Another thing, you can see right here on the cowl on the front of the truck, when I taped this off, I didn't tape the bottom. So my overspray from this truck, you can see, is on the top of the inside of the cab. I got a little overspray here. There's a little bit there. So some people may call it good. I'm not happy with it. There again, I got a little overspray here. And this side turned out really well. Overall, the truck turned out okay, but I'm not happy with it. So I'm yet to decide if I'm going to strip it back down and start over, which will probably be what I do. There was a lot of time that went into this, but if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. So there goes to the back to, if you're going to do this hobby, you know, if you don't have the money, save your money. You know, ask mom and dad if, you know, if you're a kid, for chores to do around the house. You know, whatever you can do to make a little bit of money is always good in this hobby. If you're an adult, I know as an adult you have bills and everything, but you know, set back a little bit of money and have yourself a goal that, you know, I want this certain piece or this certain tool for my hobby. If you're dedicated, you know, set back a little money each week, and before you know it, you know, you look forward to purchasing that item, and then when you do a custom, it means more to you. So I'm gonna wrap this video up, and we will get back to this part 3 possibly tomorrow. So I'm going to continue to do videos, try to help people out, show some tricks and tips of how I build and everything. So I guess I will see y'all on the next video.